I shall sit down. I can get shorter.
Now we're at the same height here. Yeah, so tell me what's new with Karmasphere. I mean, you guys have come up a lot. I hear your name popping up all over the place.
So
you're quite famous.
The thesis is still take a person with a problem, allow them to ask their question and present them with the answer. And I think that what we're seeing this year is that people are getting far more of an idea of how it is that they want to ask the question. And more people are, what we're seeing this year now, which we never saw in previous years, was we're seeing, for example, visualization, which is not trivial graphs coming out as answers. We've seen presentations on two-dimensional grids and multi-plots and other techniques like this. So we at Karmasphere are still trying to bridge these two gaps, allow you to ask the question, allow the computer to communicate the answer and save you time in between. And I brought Taylor along just because it gives you an example of the sort of problem that we're trying to close that gap for. It's a real, very complex problem. A large data set, anything where it takes 10, 15 minutes, even 20 hours or something to run a data set as a test. If we can save a failed job from running, or we can make sure that you express yourself right in the first case.
Yes.
So,
go ahead.
well, I'll tell you another story about languages of expression. I went to somebody the other day and I said, what operating system do you want on your computer? What for? To read email, say. Oh, Windows. Why are you specifying a name of something when what you really wanted was a set of properties? If you ask people what language they want to use to talk to their computer, they will say Java, Python, SQL, something like that.
English.
You see, you've already broken the mold that a lot of people have been beaten into by their databases, and you've said, this is the language I want to use. Not the language that I used last week, not the language that I was forced to use before, but the language that I actually want to use. And it's funny that there's one supplier in here, Mathematica, which actually lets you ask your question in English and will give you a real answer to it, so you've hit it.
Beautiful. You talked before about people are starting to ask the questions. That's kind of the hardest part, is what questions do you ask, right? I mean,
yes.
People had a hard time with that.
People have to ask the right questions about their data. So things that I've heard said recently, I was sitting at one of these very, very long, beautiful wooden boardroom tables that went on for miles, and somebody way down the other end of the table down there said, "Ooh, big data," he said. "There's gold in them thou hills." And I can't do the accent.
No, you can't. That was good, though. That was a good effort.
And then the process from there is the best set of scientists, who are not big data scientists, but they're very experienced analysts, said it's the process of hypothesis generation, where you come up with an idea that you want to know if it's true or not, and hypothesis confirmation or refutation if that's the case. And that's the loop that people go through. And a lot of research papers, if you read through the academic literature, they make a hypothesis, they confirm it, they publish a paper, they don't productize it. So those are the stages: create hypotheses, confirm hypotheses, go around this loop 100 times, take the one that you really liked and productize it.
Yeah. So was that guy who said there's gold in them Nar Hills, was he trying to give you money, or was that an investor potentially? Or?
I'm not going to identify him, of course, but we sincerely hope that he will be giving us a vast quantity of money in the very near future.
Let's hope so. Now I have to ask, what do you got going here? Lost the game.
It says
Yes.
I lost the game.
So did you. The chess match? Or?
No, not at all. It is the game, which is played globally and on the internet.
That game?
That game.
Oh.
The one which everybody loses,
Yeah,
and you have now
course.
lost, of course.
Yeah.
You can look it up on the internet if
Do
you're
I
not
get one of
familiar
these?
with it. I only had one sticker. When we were in New York, I had a bag of stickers, and this year I only had one sticker, so I had to think of something smaller.
So tell me more about what's going on with Karmasphere. What's new with you guys?
We are now building algorithms to solve problems. And it's the main product that we've got out at the moment is our SQL analyst. When we start asking people, what's the top language that you use to solve your problems, it's very often SQL.
Yep.
SQL's a very limited language, so we're trying to improve the support for SQL, we're trying to improve the performance of the SQL, we're trying to improve the reliability, and the other thing that we've done an awful lot of in the last 6 months is integration with Amazon, because this thing has to just drop out of the box and go. And now what we've got is we've got this ability to have a truly interactive, absolutely traditional SQL environment with your tables down the left-hand side and the columns under them, but running queries against a persistent elastic MapReduce cluster. And that took quite a bit of engineering, but we're quite happy with it. But we're going on from there to just working with expert groups, working with people who really understand their problem space, people like Taylor, who you just spoke to, and who has this marvelous understanding of his problem. And I've been working with other scientists who have incredible understandings of their own problem, but can't then translate it into computer speak, and somewhere we have to meet in the middle. So I've been getting expert groups together and just talking through problems and learning about their problems.
So tell me more about how you came to Karmasphere and why Karmasphere. I mean, you're a legend in this crowd.
I can't be.
No, you really are. And so you virtually could do anything. How did you end up Karmasphere? How'd that happen?
There's a danger whenever I get asked a question like that I will tell a very interesting story, and I'll tell.
Oh, we love interesting stories. Come on, you can't preface a story like that and then not tell me the interesting story?
I should warn you that I tell a different story each time, and that they're all true.
Okay.
So I was sitting on the internet one day, and Meng Wang, who was our original founder, he was the guy who created SPF, the system which protected email against forgery for the internet, and he needed some crypto work done for that. And he said, I need somebody to do 1 hour's worth of crypto work for me. And I said yes faster than anybody else. And I didn't know anything about crypto, but I knew somebody who did, because I used to sit next to a crypto group, so some of it used to rub off. And I did the job, and it took about a week. And he and I got on, and so he started Karmasphere. And coming out of the email anti-forgery protocol was the whole principle that with enough data you could start doing reputation for email, and so we became a data company doing reputation data. And it was very fashionable at the time, and so did a lot of other people, and we neither succeeded nor failed, so we petered on for a number of years. But being a data company gave us an understanding of the problems that you had to address if you were going to work with large data. And for us at the time, large data was a 10 gigabyte SQL database. As you can imagine, it didn't work. And at some point a couple of years ago, I took a sort of a sabbatical from the company to say, I'm going to beat the hell out of some of these tools. And when I came back to Martin, our CEO, who had worked with us all through the time, and I showed him these tools, and he said, that's nice. And we made this big decision, and it was one of the biggest decisions that we've ever made, was to turn the whole company on its head and say we're now going to ship the tools instead of shipping the data. And the other enormous decision, which as a technologist I was very, very invested in, was that when we ran the old Karmasphere as a data company, we had an engine that did our data processing. And while the SQL database was a failure, our processing engine was actually quite successful. And the big decision was to say that when we wrote this interface and when we said we need to bring access to big data to the world, the big decision was not to do it for this engine that we all understood, but to do it for Hadoop instead. Because Hadoop had the following, it had the fashion, it had this entire ecosystem which we were never going to be able to build around our own product. And so to actually throw out 2 years worth of rather beautiful code, we've still got it on the back burner and we may bring it back in one day, but to throw that out and start saying we're going to build a new product on somebody else's product line was actually a very big decision, and it took a lot of thinking.
That's a fantastic story, especially from a standpoint of an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, you have to constantly question what you're doing.
Yes.
And be brutally honest.
Oh, I
and
do
it's
enough
hard.
of that.
It's hard to do sometimes because
Yes.
you fall in love with what you're doing, and you say, "Oh, we can make this work." You know, I can see, I can envision, but you know, if the market signals are saying we're not seeing it now, but and you always feel like that you know you're about to crack that critical mass, and so that takes a lot of serious thinking. I'm not surprised you had to go away to sort of come to that realization and step away from the business a little bit. So there's a lesson in there for the entrepreneurs in the audience, I think.
So when I was studying design in school, the design lecturers were very explicit on the fact that even if you were just building, one of our projects was to build a clock. And he said, you're going to design and build a clock, and here's a clock mechanism. And I was a pain, so of course I drew one of Escher's impossible diagrams and said, I want to build this to the teacher. And then you've got to watch the teacher's face as he tries to explain to you why you can't build it. But sir, I drew it, of course I can build it. Doesn't work. But anyway, the philosophy that they had was draw 5, 10, 15 designs and then choose the one that you're going to develop. And I always had my design. This was what I want to build. And then it was an exercise to just think up 5 more things to satisfy the professor. And then I started thinking, it applies to venture capital companies. What you don't do is you don't get a company that has 5 ideas and they choose one and then you invest in them. What you do is you choose 5 companies and then you invest in one. So the whole question of which idea is going to progress, which idea is going to develop, has now moved up one more level to the customer, to the venture capitalist. And especially in the financial industry, I believe a lot of the people in the financial industry will say, there's 5 products in this market, we're going to buy all of the ones that look any good at all. We're only going to use one, but we really want to know what the others are saying. So a lot of this problem of deciding which design to follow has moved up one tier. And the effect of this is to increase the manpower in the tier below, because what we've now got is a lot of startups with 1 person per idea developing them like fury, rather than 1 person to 5 ideas trying to work out which one to develop and maybe getting it wrong.
Yeah, you're describing the dynamic in this industry that we're in here. Well, Shevek, thanks very much for coming by theCUBE.
Thank you very much
indeed. Great to have you. I know we traded some emails, and I'm glad we could fit you in. It was great to see you again.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll see you again.
That was Shevek from Karmasphere. As I said, he really is a legend in the big data industry, and now a CUBE alum, John. We've
twice.
Yeah,
two-timer.
We met Shevek at Hadoop World, and just really a brilliant mind. You know,
he gets he's talking about algorithms and how the data, thinking from a different angle on it, and I think it's relevant.